How's it going, everybody? This is Juansgalt with Juansgalt Crypto TV. And chances are you're paying attention to the price and you in Bitcoin Cash, and you're seeing the Bitcoin scaling wars or Bitcoin identity wars, identity crisis sort of going on right now. I've been paying attention to this, tweeting about it. I wrote about it on TDV, and I've been sort of on Facebook and stuff about it, but things are sort of like the lines have been drawn. People are taking their sides, and a lot of Ancaps, a lot of popular Ancaps have sort of put their weight behind Bitcoin Cash, and they're saying that they're going to, they're being very, very clear and loud about sort of their position, and they believe that AXA, this sort of multinational corporation who has about 20% stake in Blockstream, or invested in Blockstream, which is hiring some of the core developers of Bitcoin, that they are pulling the strings behind the curtains in a sense, and that's why Bitcoin core developers are doing what they're doing, right? I don't really believe that theory, even though the money does follow, but you can follow the money pretty much in any direction and end up at Bilderberg anyways. You could say that China, there's a variety of Chinese investors that have put money behind Bitmain. Bitmain is a Bitcoin ASIC manufacturing mining monopoly. They have over 46, but they have about 46% of the mining power in Bitcoin Cash and a great deal of mining power in Bitcoin. And they may be mining even more in Bitcoin Cash because there's sort of like 30% of the Bitcoin Cash mining hashing power that's not being accounted for. And so how did they get that monopoly, right? Well, apparently they had a lot more money to invest than their competitors, and this is one of their competitors who went bankrupt. They said, we don't understand how they're profitable. That they're making way too, like they're investing way more money than they can actually profit from. And if they're selling, right, the only way they can make that kind of money is basically they hold and then they just spend fiat into building this sort of mining farms and this mining equipment and hold Bitcoin long term. But they're not profitable at a sort of sale at a Bitcoin price rate. And on top of that, there's been sort of backwards engineering and analysis from Bitcoin Core people that the ASICs behind Bitmain have this kind of like 10% ASIC boost, which is patented. It's a kind of like a hack of the way that mining works. And that this was incompatible with SegWit, and that's the main reason why, one of the main reasons why Bitmain is opposed to SegWit. I don't know if that theory is true either. I can see it happening, and patents definitely have a great deal of power. In fact, Falkvinch, who is now, I don't know exactly where this is coming from, apparently he's like the new CEO of Bitcoin Cash, has been very loud and critical of the way that patents corrupt industries. And yet he has kind of dismissed the Bitmain patent problem as a sort of, attack from core or something like that. So this is, Roger Ver, Jeff Berwick, Kim.com is sort of like pumping it a little bit as well. McAfee has been pumping Bitcoin Cash as well. So a lot of the Ancap leaders have sort of moved to Bitcoin Cash. I don't really buy this whole AXA argument. I think that the scaling problem is, as an argument, as a debate, the paths are really clear. Like if you try to reach Visa level volume on chain, your blocks are going to get bigger, and there's delays in relaying blocks to the network, especially if you're behind the wall of China, the Chinese wall of the internet, the firewall of China. Then there's delays in relaying that, which gives miners inside of China an advantage because the blocks get faster to them, so they can start mining on top of the blocks faster, especially if they're multi-megabyte blocks. The bigger the blocks are, the more lag there can be in the dissemination of the blocks across the networks. And so it centralizes the mining in China. Bitmain is in China. Most of the mining in Bitcoin is in China. And so this could very well be a Chinese government play to take a big piece of the Bitcoin market, and that China and Russia and all these countries are doing everything they can to sort of break away from the US dollar And that may mean if they can get a piece of the cryptocurrency space, why not? That's just another way to sort of move things forward. The bigger the blocks, the harder it is for full nodes to, for hobbyists to run full nodes. And that means that it's going to be harder for everyday users of Bitcoin or hobbyists or people that are like just normal geeks that are not part of some organization or some mining firm or some corporation to actually verify the consensus rules of the cryptocurrency that you're running. This is a problem that's always going to be a part of the blockchain design. And this is the main reason, argumentative-wise, why Bitcoin Core has gone for Lightning Networks, which is going to be on layer 2, and it's sort of going to try to do like an internet-level play. So that's what's going on there. I don't really, you know, Bitcoin Cash. I mean, I'm happy for the Ancaps. You know, go and create your own altcoin, right? Or your own sort of Bitcoin Cash. You think it's the real Bitcoin, whatever. I think the real Bitcoin is dead. I think that you could argue that the real Bitcoin has outgrown its initial stage. It has the infrastructure, like Bitcoin Core has the infrastructure, and the legacy nodes is backwards compatible, which makes it as close to the real Bitcoin as you could be. But SegWit does take a path, and Bitcoin Cash takes another path. And you know what? I don't really buy that this whole argument that Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. I don't really know how to resolve that conflict. I've just kind of decided to call them Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash because this disagreement about branding and marketing is not one that I know how to resolve, other than to see how the market settles on it. But I don't like the way that this branding branding war is happening. I think that it's dishonest to tell people that your coin is something that it's not, right? You should say Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin before the SegWit update, or it's sort of like you can say it's the original, whatever, but you change the difficulty algorithm, so it's still the original. You change one of the consensus rules. You're changing a variety of things as well, and so I don't know if the difficulty algorithm is a consensus rule, but it's definitely pretty important. So you know, it's not that simple as the marketing is sort of the content that supporters of Bitcoin Cash are putting out there. Long story short, I also don't believe that there's going to be a flippening. I don't believe that Bitcoin Cash is going to overtake Bitcoin in the near term. Somebody made a bet with me that Bitcoin Cash is going to overtake Bitcoin by the end of 2018. I made a bet, $500, that it's not going to happen. And you know, I guess we'll see what happens. I think that I'm definitely going to keep reporting on this. I'm definitely going to keep creating content on this, whatever media organization I'm working with. And I think this is going to be good for the Ancap leaders to go and try to figure out how to have consensus at a multi-billion-dollar level of a currency. They want to have their own coin. They can pretend that I guess they're going to pretend that it's the real Bitcoin. And Bitcoin Core people are going to say, well, no, we're the real Bitcoin. And I don't know how that debate is going to settle. But I think, you know, I want to see them try, because there's a fundamental paradox in Bitcoin Cash in the way that the emergent consensus is going to happen. Is like you have two parties, you know, just to keep it simple. You have two parties that have ideas about how to solve a Bitcoin Cash problem that are in conflict with each other, right? And then one of the ethos of the Bitcoin emergent consensus and Bitcoin Cash, or whatever they're doing, is leaderless development, right? Okay, great. But if somebody takes the lead and that breaks the other one, that creates a conflict. That conflict can start escalating, right? And that escalation could potentially break usability for different users and different clients and split the chain and threaten the confidence in Bitcoin Cash, right? And so how do you prevent that conflict, right? Well, people are going to have to talk and be very engaged in communication, and that's something that's sort of talked about in Falk Finch's white paper, which he put out, where he's apparently the CEO of Bitcoin Cash. Anyways. And so they're gonna have to solve this problem through conversation. Okay, great. So by what standards do you resolve conflicts through conversation? You know, you try to debate things, and what are the sort of computer science terms, what are the computer science sort of metrics, what are the economic sort of principles that you have established through community consensus or through plenty of discussion. How are you going to resolve these conflicts, right? And so that's one part. You have to have a huge amount of communication. The second part is, where are you going to resolve these conflicts? Because we're in cyberspace, so you need a forum somewhere. You can have multiple forums, but you're going to have at least one place to have the conversations. And so what they're going to end up having to do is probably, which they already have, is they have a BitcoinCash mailing list. They already have one. And so people are going to have to debate in a mailing list, right? And they're going to have to put out code. And so where are they going to put the code? Well, they're going to put it in GitHub, probably, if they're going to be open source, unless they're going to go closed source, which is kind of a centralization and security problem. If you release the code before it's known, sort of, I guess there's a debate there. So, there's a debate there, but I mean, open source is generally believed to be much more secure than closed source, because you have a lot of eyes looking at it, and so if nobody is can hack it by looking at it, then it's clearly more secure than code that just recently got seen, and maybe somebody sees a vulnerability, now it's in production code, right? So unless they go dark, they go sort of closed source, then they're going to have to do open source, or they're going to have a GitHub, and so they're going to have a problem, which is like a bunch of people submitting GitHub pull requests, and you can't integrate them all because you got to review all of them, right? And somebody's going to have to make the decision about whether or not to add them to the GitHub repo. And if you have multiple GitHub repos from different Bitcoin Cash development communities, and some of them contradict with each other, how are you going to decide which one is going to sort of be the one integrated when you're talking about standards that influence the other ones, right? So you're going to end up with some sort of communication organization that debates software upgrades and stuff like that, and you're going to end up with the upgrades that have the best argumentation, the best software rising to the top. And guess what? That's what Bitcoin Core is. That's Bitcoin Core. That's what Bitcoin Core is. Not some corporation mysteriously moving code and like smoking a pipe. No, Bitcoin Core is an open source development community with over 300 developers that have contributed pieces of code over time. Anybody can contribute code to Bitcoin Core. So, no, you're going to end up at the same place, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the anarchists have some sort of special strategic consensus strategy that I'm not aware of. Maybe they'll innovate. That's great. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes, and I'll be reporting on both fairly. And I think, to Bitcoin Cash's credit, even though I think they're generally centralized by mining power, and I believe that they have, to my knowledge, they have a lot less developers, and I don't know about the reputation or the sort of the development prowess of these developers. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not. I haven't really checked that. But they're definitely not, some of them are not particularly known in the Bitcoin space. Some of them may be, I don't know, right? So I'm not gonna, you have Jeff Garcic and Gavin and Dresden, which are behind, they're old school Bitcoin developers that got kicked out from Core, for a variety of reasons, including pumping fake Satoshi, Bitcoin, Gavin McKenna. Anyways, this is a whole other story that I don't feel like getting into right now. And so, okay, great. So they have developers and stuff. I want to see what they do. And to be fair to Bitcoin Cash, they're going to have cheaper transactions for a while. They're going to be able to scale on chain, and it's going to be a long time, perhaps years, before they become too centralized, or centralized enough that governments can now capture them through regulatory compliance, because the nodes are so big, it's so expensive to run a full node, that they're going to end up in data, in servers, and Amazon servers, or other sort of database servers. And the mining is so centralized that government can now has big enough targets that they can go for and capture and regulate, right? So when that happens, then we'll come back in history and look at this conflict and be like, shit, I guess Core was right. If that never happens, then Bitcoin Cash is going to have cheaper transactions, and a variety of companies that want cheaper transaction fees on chain, that have prepared code for that are not interested or willing to make the investments to switch to Lightning networks, they're going to move to Bitcoin Cash, and that's fine. I think these two coins can cooperate. I think that they can, Bitcoin Core is going to have more security, it's going to have more hashing power eventually, or at least it's going to have more security in the ease with which you can verify the consensus rules of the algorithm, because it's cheaper to run a full node in Core. It's going to have more security, I think, and so it's going to be probably more valuable than Bitcoin Cash for the long term. But Bitcoin Cash is going to be faster to transport, and I guess if wallets start integrating Bitcoin Cash into the Bitcoin wallets, then now you have both frankly, I think Dash is a much better digital cash because it actually solves some of the problems with centralization of nodes by paying block rewards for people who host full nodes so that the network keeps a high volume of full nodes instead of just centralizing over time towards whatever corporations or companies or miners have the capacity to pay for a really big blockchain. Okay, so that's what's going on. I think it's reprehensible that there's this sort of attitude of us versus them. I think that there's almost arrogance in going against the product of consensus from Bitcoin Core that has happened, like consensus of developers, core developers that have ended up with positions of credibility, high credibility inside of Bitcoin Core through a chain of custody that was set off by Satoshi. That Satoshi gave the commit access first. I think it was to Jeff Garzik or Gavin Andresen. I think it might be Gavin Andresen. And then he gave it to, I believe, Luke, and Luke to to Vladimir. Well, anyways, like there's a link. I'll post it below, right? And it's gone all the way down to whoever has commit access in Bitcoin Core right now, whoever sort of has higher credibility. So there's an unbroken chain of trust, of custody of the GitHub keys to Bitcoin, all the way to Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Cash is saying we oppose that chain of custody. We oppose that chain of commit rights to GitHub, and they're just going to do another thing. Great, whatever. There's definitely an interesting argument there that they're arguably opposing the wisdom of Satoshi and who he delegated and who they delegated to. But then Gavin Andresen is now behind Bitcoin Cash, and so. Yeah, so this is not as simple as they'll say, and I don't think Bitcoin Cash, with 40% or 50% of the volume coming from South Korea with one exchange, Bitcoin Cash is in altcoin territory, in altcoin quality of territory. So, yeah, and by the way, while we're on the topic, this whole argument of censorship, that Bitcoin Core has been censoring people, you can't censor people in the internet. It's nearly impossible. All you need to do, it takes about 3 minutes to create a Facebook forum. It takes about 10 minutes to create an alternative Reddit. And Roger Ver has had Bitcoin.com and Bitcoin.com news for a couple of years now. Twitter, anybody can access Twitter and tweet away. There's been no censorship in Bitcoin for years. Maybe there was censorship for about 6 months in Bitcoin Talk during the critical debate in 2013. But even then, you could still sort of have competing forums. And I bet you there was competing forums back then too. So even Bitcoin.com has a forum. So censorship stuff is done. People are educated now. And anyways, I think it's obviously a high passion debate. At the end of the day, competition will let the biggest and let the best network and the best network win. And they'll be competing and there'll be different use cases. And so I'm with Andres Antonopoulos on this. But I think that this whole follow the money conspiracy theory of access stuff, you can't dispute that. You just come up with it. You can't dispute it. It's 20% stake, and as far as I know, Blockstream has really strong legal contracts that Core developers, developers hired by Core, sign, where it basically says that nobody can tell these developers what to do. They are completely free in their judgment. It's just you gotta pay the bill somehow, right? So yeah. Anyways, that's where I'm at right now. Let me know what you think. Hot debate. It's pretty interesting. It's also very interesting that the Ancaps are sort of all kind of going with Bitcoin Cash. Go for it. It's gonna be fun to watch. They haven't satisfied my skepticism yet. I think that they should denounce fake Satoshi. I think that they should have him, put together like a legal defense fund and have him prove with PGP or with a Bitcoin key signing, which is super easy. It takes about 3 minutes to prove that you own Bitcoin, and Satoshi Nakamoto would own like the first, would have Bitcoin in the first 50 blocks. So it would be arbitrary for me to prove that he's Satoshi Nakamoto. Put together, with all that Bitcoin Cash treasury, put together a fund, legal defense fund, and have him prove that he's Satoshi. Then you'll have a really strong argument for being the true Bitcoin if you have Satoshi Nakamoto behind you. But right now you have the Satoshi Nakamoto suspects, or like people that you think that might be putting their weight behind Bitcoin Core, right? You had Nick Szabo saying no to X. I don't know what he's saying on Bitcoin Cash, but he sort of come out on public and said that on-chain scaling and bigger blocks don't make sense. So, anyways, just be careful out there. Don't buy it. Don't get caught up in the hype and the FUD. Don't get caught up in the panic. There's been warnings about this conflict coming for a while. If you didn't take your positions, hopefully you didn't sell any of your Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Core or even Bitcoin Gold. You know, hold and wait for this conflict to settle is probably the best way. But yeah, that's what I think about that. So, let me know what you think. Bye.
This conversation was sponsored by Komodo, a zero-knowledge, peer-to-peer atomic swap exchange. Learn more at komodoplatform.com.